Because if you can't distill your big idea into one sentence, it means you haven't really thought it through. So that one sentence should be, what is it that it does? Or what is it how is it going to change my life?
Mhm.
Now you've hooked me. Now I'm interested. Okay, tell me more.
Hello, everybody. This is Jake Senziani, host of the Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast, here with my co-host, the multifamily mentor, the coach, chef, the father, six, the best-selling author, the G-Daddy. Gino Barbo. Gino, how's it going?
Mr. Stenziano, I'm doing good. How you doing, bro?
Always making it happen, big man. Today's guest is Carmine Gallo, best-selling author and president of Gallo Communications Group. Carmine's 9 books have been endorsed by top leaders, billionaires, and CEOs who have used his ideas to transform their business. I didn't tell Carmine this, but back in Multifamily Mastery 2, I actually picked his book up. I think it was at a FedEx getting some prints, and I said, you know what, I need some help. That right there, that one, Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. So very cool. We know his work. His best-selling books include The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs, Talk Like Ted, The Storyteller's Secret, and 5 Stars. So without further ado, Carmine, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jake. Thanks, Gino. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And
Hey.
I'm glad that I'm speaking to a couple of hosts with a lot of energy.
Hey, it's our pleasure. So tell us how you got started and what attracted you to public speaking and presentations.
Well, I started as a journalist. I spent about 15 years of my career as a television news journalist, especially in the last few years covering business news. And at that time, I was in New York. I live in California, but I was covering business news in Manhattan, in the financial capital of the world. And I began to notice a trend, and it's a very well-established trend in TV, that there are only a handful of really good communicators. So if you watch CNBC or any of the other Bloomberg or any of the other business shows, you tend to see the same faces. They're stockbrokers, analysts, experts, whether it's real estate or any other type of field. But there are thousands of financial experts in Manhattan. Why are we only choosing the same handful, literally a handful, to go back to time and time again? The same economists who I interviewed 15 years ago I still see today. There's thousands of economists. Why are we only going back to about 10? Because they are better at communicating their ideas. Does that mean they are the best stockbrokers or the stock analysts in the world? I don't know. Who knows? Maybe their track record is good. Maybe it's just okay. But that's not the number one reason why you see them on television. It's because they are outstanding at communication. And that became the theme throughout most of my books, is this fundamental fact that if you can have a great idea, but if you cannot communicate that idea in a way that inspires people and gets people excited about you and your idea and your company, then you're still going to be left behind. But those who can get better, even a little better, at expressing their idea better than their peers or their competitors, can really stand out in this age of information.
So, Carmine, how did you go from journalist to entrepreneur? How did that leap look?
I got tired of being on the salary track and realized I think it's the same journey that most of us have had, when you realize that no matter how you work, it doesn't necessarily lead to a significantly higher paycheck or income. So I like all entrepreneurs, I wanted more control. And so I actually left a high-paying job as a vice president of a global public relations firm, because after journalism, I was still like, well, I need a salary. What am I going to do? So I got into a public relations firm, kind of doing, the training of executives on communication skills. But so I left a high-paying job and I went to zero and $1,200. I had one $1,200 project lined up in the next 6 months. So that was, but again, that's the entrepreneurial journey, right? We've all been through that.
So what inspired you to write the first book then?
Well, let's talk about the first big book, because there were a couple of other small books on communication by smaller publishers, but the first book that caught everyone's attention was presentations, well, everyone's attention, everyone within, entrepreneurship and communication.
No, the
People
book's
want to
out there.
learn how to
Don't be too humble, right? It's out there.
So I started writing blogs and columns, and one really caught on, which was Steve Jobs and how he gave presentations. And Steve Jobs was still alive. And I knew, because I live in Silicon Valley, I had talked to and I knew designers for Apple's presentations. And it was extraordinary. Steve Jobs was the greatest corporate storyteller of our time. No one is matched him, and no one has matched him since in terms of just the whole package, just the creativity of presenting. And I wrote a column that did very well, so we decided let's write a book on it, and it became an international bestseller. Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs became really big all over the world, especially like in Japan. So there is a hunger out there for people to learn every once in a while, like a Western mentality of how to present ideas in a way that really captures people's imagination. So I started writing other books with more of a emphasis on global populations and global cultures, because public speaking and communication skills, it's a universal desire to get better at that skill.
What do you see separating Jobs? Was it that he was just obsessed? I mean, to me, it seemed like he was so obsessed with every detail, and he just, and this was based on, the books I've read his autobiography, watched the movies on him. In your research, was it that obsession that he just was going to work until every detail was correct, or was it a natural talent? What's your take on that in terms of why they were so damn good?
Let's get away from natural talent.
Yes.
Because that was my big takeaway. And that's been my takeaway, not only from the Steve Jobs book, but the other books I've written too. This is really important to know. A lot of people have told me, well, I'm not like Steve Jobs. I can never do that. Well, neither could he. Early on in his career, Steve Jobs was sort of an awkward presenter. We're not born with a PowerPoint clicker in our hand. We're not born to be on a stage, or even we're not born knowing how to do virtual meetings. So these are skills that can be learned, built, developed. Yes, Jake, you said Steve Jobs was obsessed. Yes, he was. So he was obsessed with
I'm not saying that in a bad way. I just was.
No,
I was
he,
just,
no,
yeah.
he. Michael Moritz, one of the great venture capitalists. I've interviewed a lot of venture capitalists out here in Silicon Valley. Michael Moritz, who backed Airbnb and Google and Yahoo, he once told me that he looks for entrepreneurs who are not. I said, "Do you look for passion?" And he goes, "Passion? No, you got to look for obsession. That this is the only thing they live for." So obsession kind of gets a bad rap every once in a while, but that's what the venture capitalists look for. You have to be obsessed about a particular topic that you can really get behind. Yeah, so Steve Jobs was obsessed and passionate in a good way, and he was also passionate about creating the best narrative he could to introduce new products. So he was doing storytelling. I know that's a big topic of ours. He was doing storytelling years before anybody else knew that it was a thing in business. And so when he was doing storytelling before he even introduced slides like Apple Keynote or PowerPoint. None of those things were invented. So in 1984, when Steve Jobs introduced the first Macintosh, he created this entire dramatic narrative. It's still on YouTube, where he said IBM was bent on taking over the world. They've turned their guns on the last bastion of freedom, and that's Macintosh.
This was the 1984 video, right?
The 1984. Yeah. That video is what most people know, but watch the actual presentation because it mirrors that video. And so he created this whole narrative of villains and hurdles and obstacles. And so by the
hero
end of it,
versus, you talk about that in the book, the hero versus the villain, right?
Yeah. He was doing that. Steve Jobs was doing that before slides were invented. And so that's why he understood narrative on a very different level. And
was he coached though, or was did he know it?
That we learn.
Sorry,
I don't think.
Yeah.
No, I don't think Steve Jobs was ever coached. I never heard that from anybody. So Steve Jobs was never coached, but he was the one who raised the bar for everybody else. Although he did take feedback, and I learned this from Guy Kawasaki. the first Mac evangelist, and from others who have worked with Steve Jobs. He did take feedback. A lot of people think that he was sort of the isolated visionary. What he would do. Ken Kosienda told me this. Ken Kosienda invented the keypad for the iPhone, among other things. So he worked with Steve Jobs really closely. And he said, Carmine, it was extraordinary because when he practiced presentations, he took on a character. We would go into the auditorium. There were a handful of executives there, anyone who kind of on a need to know basis, right? Because they even kept parts of the presentation secret from everybody else. So you would go in for your part of the presentation. Steve Jobs got on stage. He would wear his uniform, which was the black mock turtleneck, and the sneakers and the jeans. But he didn't always wear those. Sometimes he would come in shorts, but not for the presentation. So he kind of got in uniform, got on stage, and did the presentation out loud with gestures, and his voice changed and his energy changed. And then he would stop, pause, come back down to earth, walk down and say, okay, what could we have done better? What didn't you understand? How can we improve that demo? How do the slides look? So Jake, yes, he was obsessed. He was obsessed with every aspect of communication, but he definitely took feedback and rehearsed it and practiced it. And so when I wrote Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs, I looked at, I had to watch countless videos. He improved considerably from his very first presentations, which were kind of behind a podium or a lectern, kind of holding on, reading a speech, to the iPhone presentation in 2007, which was one of the best business presentations of our time.
I love that. So before we get into some of the storyteller's secrets, just generally, what makes a person a better speaker? How can Jake and Gino become better speakers today?
I always start, and I know this might sound soft, but I always start with passion. And I try to I ask executives all the time, what is it that you are really passionate about? Dig deep to identify your unique connection to the topic. Because I can teach techniques. I could teach strategies, word choice, slides. I can't teach passion. And you cannot inspire unless you're inspired yourself. But when I kind of ask these I prod, I ask these questions that make me feel really silly. Like once I asked, what makes your heart sing? Can you imagine that? Asking a senior executive at like some big
What do you say?
publicly traded company, what makes your heart sing? I felt like an Oprah moment. Okay, but the reason why I do that, and now I'm not as self-conscious about it, is years ago I watched a video of Steve Jobs, one of his last public presentations, and he said it's the intersection of technology and video and liberal arts that makes my heart sing. And I thought, wow, what a great question. So I turned into a question, and I asked senior executives all the time. So, okay, no, I always ask them, so what do you do? And they give me their formal title. Then I ask them, okay, great. And what do you like about your job? Well, I like building relationships. Okay, great. What are you passionate about? Well, I'm passionate about service and serving our customers. Okay. So in other words, they kind of go through that typical kind of marketing, so to speak. So that's when I break it down. I say, no, really, really, Jake, how about if I phrase it like this? What makes your heart sing? And they think, and they're kind of thrown off, and they think about it for a minute, and then the next thing they do is they give me like a story, just a great story that nobody in the room or their staff had ever heard. And sometimes it brings tears to people's eyes. So can I give you a short anecdote?
Yes.
This happens quite a bit, but I was working with senior executive from Walmart, and the motto is live better, I forgot the motto exactly, but it's like save money, live better. It's a slogan: save money, live better. And I was her. She was doing these monthly meetings where she had all the new corporate folks, the corporate staff that had come in. So she was part of that whole onboarding process. And she's like, yeah, it kind of falls flat a lot. And I said, so show me your PowerPoints, show me what you're doing. And it was all about the information. Here's
Mhm.
what you need to know. Okay, hey, first day here at Walmart. Here's what you need to know about the corporate environment. Here's charts and figures and data and information. Go get them. So I said, yeah, well, of course you're not connecting with anybody. I mean, there's no emotional connection here. What are you really passionate about? Well, I'm passionate about the stuff we offer customers and all that. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I know. I read that on the website. What makes your heart sing? And then she said, I'll never forget this because there were a group of us in the room with this particular executive, and she said, well, you know that slogan, save money, live better. That means something. I
Wow.
said, oh, you mean the little tagline at the bottom of the logo? Tell me about it. And she gave us this emotional, heartbreaking story. It was very inspiring, actually. But she gave us this story. I'll make it into like 20 seconds. Like her brother-in-law had ALS, and it was really hard for him to get around. This was before she even joined Walmart. So they went to Walmart to save money, and she saved like $300 or $500 a month on the very same necessities that they were buying elsewhere.
Mm.
And so they used that money to buy a disabled a van for the disabled, and that van then was able to take her brother-in-law to his son's graduation. I mean, come on, there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Uh-huh.
And I said, do you have a photo of your brother-in-law at the graduation and all that? She goes, oh yeah. I said, have you ever told anyone at Walmart that story? And she said, no, no one, no one's really asked about it.
Uh-huh.
So again, it's kind of like prodding and trying to get that emotional hook out of people. So
Mhm.
that's why I've spent so much time in this conversation on, digging deep to identify what is it about what you do that has an emotional connection to your life and to who you are. That's core to
Mhm.
who you are, because that's going to be the foundation for the rest of all of your conversations. Oh, and
I
by the way, that woman sent me an email. True story. She sent me an email a few months later. She said, I've been doing this, for a few months now, and there's only one problem with it. I don't have enough time to schedule all the people who want to have lunch with me and to meet me and who want me to mentor them.
That's a good problem,
Yeah,
Carmine,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So
So
everybody out there, let me bring this back into multifamily real estate. And if you're
yeah,
trying to raise capital or you're trying to get into the business itself, you need to be passionate about why are you raising capital? Are you offering somebody an opportunity? Maybe somebody who puts money in the stock market, they can put money with you, they can get better rates of return. Find out why you're passionate about what you're doing. At Jake and Gino, I'm passionate about educating people. People with financial intelligence can change the world for the better. That's my passion. I know that if I can teach parents and the young Americans here all about financial intelligence, about saving, about not spending money, about actually investing for their future, about entrepreneurship, about what an investor looks like, about what parents can do. I'm passionate about that. I want to convey that. So it's going to be a lot easier for me to present on that topic. So for anybody who's out there in multifamily trying to raise capital, I think what Carmine says, passion. Bring your passion out. Know why you're doing this, and those stories are really important. Jake, you want to add to that?
No,
hey,
I do
hold
because
on,
you hit,
Gino,
yeah.
real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you were talking about you're Italian, right?
Uh,
Okay, so like me, you use your hands more often
yes, too
than
much.
most people. But when you were talking about what you're passionate about and how educating people in financial intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
your voice changes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Watch the video
I think he
back.
grew an inch, Carmine. I think he
Yeah.
Yep,
literally grew an
Yes.
inch.
your
Yes.
posture changed,
Mm-hmm.
your voice changed,
Mm-hmm.
your expressions became more animated. You use
Mm-hmm.
more hand gestures. So
Mm-hmm.
the connection between your passion for a topic and your message are intimately connected.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was gonna piggyback on that because something just hit me so hard, Gino. Last night, my cousin Jamie texted me and was asking me. He just had a second child, and so so happy for those guys. But he's saying, what are you doing for college? What are you doing for the kids for college? And Gino and I have this conversation all the time. We go and buy assets. We don't put it in the 529 or whatever. And I kind of was like, I didn't even know how to respond to that because I didn't want it to come across as arrogant or weird. But that's what multifamily can do for you. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you're able to translate that to an investor or what's separating your company, guys, this is life-changing stuff. You're not going out there and putting money aside to save for a rainy day. You're investing in assets that will pay for your lifestyle, and then it'll still be there after the fact. So that was just something that hit me. I was like, I don't even know how to communicate this right now, because I don't have a college plan. I buy apartments, and those apartments take care of everything else. That is the college plan. So it was just that's something that
I
was
want to get
kinda
into the
crazy.
storyteller's secrets, but really,
Yeah.
how can you create a good story? I like, because I've read books on creating stories and going from neocortex to the croc brain and all that kind of stuff. What would you say? Simple framework on.
Wait, what?
Well,
I thought
Going for the neocortex to
So-
the
this is
So-
biology now.
So
Carmine.
it's all about creating a pitch.
What book is that, Gino?
I'm a big
I know.
I'm a big Ironclad fan, right? And what happens is with our students, they're so excited. They're talking about 8% prefs, and they're talking about waterfalls and distributions. And
Oh,
Carmine
yeah.
is sitting there going, what the hell are you talking about? So your croc brain is your primitive brain, which calls BS. And I'm going from my neocortex, elevated brain, going to your primitive brain. I've got to get past it. I have to make it exciting. I have to make it entertaining. I have to make it different, all about movement. And a lot of our students can overwhelm people when they do about this. So we have to create a story around it. And I would create the story by saying, basically, I was in New York. My passion was I needed to get out of New York. How do I do it? Well, multifamily is all about, food, clothing. And what's the third one, Jake?
Apartments, baby.
Apartments.
Come on now.
So that's a basic human need. That's what multifamily is all about. And we can get into demographics where the young people have too much student debt and the old people are retiring. So I'm trying to get in there in a certain way to create the story, the narrative. And then from there, they're a little bit more receptive to the punchline. Then they'll ask me, oh, can you tell me more? Well, multifamily, it throws off dividends, it throws off cash flow. I can get into it. But if I start with the high level stuff, I'm losing them. So any way for you, how to create that good story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does. I'm going to use you as an example. So after you create dividends, what is the vision? Like, where are you transforming people? What's the end?
What's great about it is we're transforming lives, right? We're transforming the residents who live there because we're creating a safe, clean, affordable apartment, right? We're also holding hard assets. What's the government doing right now? Well, they're printing money on demand. We like to control hard assets, right? We like to control a basic human need. We have amazing tax benefits, right? The tax benefits are amazing with multifamily. We can get into cost segregation, but I don't want to overwhelm you with that right now. But that's where we have something called cycle resiliency, which is another sexy word for saying, hey, you know what? When the economy goes down, people need a place to live. They're not buying homes or renting apartments. So all the benefits that come in multifamily and the demographic shifts that we're seeing right now, that all benefits multifamily. And oh, by the way, we can control it. We're running a business through multifamily. So as you see all these different levers that we're able to pull and control, that's why we love this space.
Okay, so what you just did, I don't know if you do this intentionally, but
we don't do anything intentionally when it comes to public speaking.
We ain't that
Carmine.
smart.
you mirrored the 3-act narrative structure that all great stories follow. So I've been writing about this for several years now. I learned about it from screenwriters. Being here in California, I really love film, but I love talking to creative types like screenwriters and movie producers. So every commercially successful movie, every one, otherwise it's not really a commercial success, it has to follow a 3-act structure. And it's loosely based on Joseph Campbell's, Hero of a Thousand Faces, The Hero's Journey. It's loosely based on that, but it's a little different. So the 3-act structure is every movie starts with the first 30 minutes, which is called Act 1, and that's the setup. That's when we learn about the characters. Because if you don't learn about the characters, you don't really care about the rest of the movie. Bohemian Rhapsody was perfect 3-act structure. I mean, there's so many movies that are just perfectly 3 acts. Star Wars was one of the first, but Act 2 is the next hour of the movie, and that's where all the fun and games begin. That's where the villains are introduced, and the hero has to overcome a number of what are called trials and hurdles to achieve their goal or their dream. And Act 3 obviously is the last 30 minutes, but there has to be a resolution. There has to be a transformation. So Rocky is one of the perfect, 3-act structures. And of course, even though he loses at the end, spoiler alert, Rocky is transformed, right? So there's this transformation that has to take place. So what you do, and that is a perfect 3-act structure for any business pitch. and you
Hmm.
can do it in 30 seconds. You can do it in 30 minutes.
I
And
love that.
what you just did is you gave me a three-act structure. So act one is the setup, the introduction of the backstory. What was the first thing you told me about multifamily? You did not begin by explaining what multifamily is. What is the first thing you said? Do you remember?
Basic human need.
No. Setup. Who are the characters? Tell
Oh,
me about the
Residents.
right.
yeah.
Right. No. So no, I'm going back even further. So the first thing that Gino told me was I was living in New York City.
Mm.
It's more about you and the backstory.
Uh-huh.
Remember, you were living in New
Yep.
York City and you wanted to get out. Okay, so now the hero begins his adventure, but
Hmm.
there's how is he going to do that?
He had to
How's
go
he going to
south.
do what obstacles was he going to run into? So then you
Hmm.
start
Moving six
explaining.
kids.
Yep. So then you get into explaining multifamily and some of the problems that it alleviates.
Hmm.
Okay. And then by the end, the act three, you even had a transformation in there. You had a transformation where you talked about how the lives of the people who live there are transformed, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's a transformation as well. And
Wow.
it'll transform you, the investor. Whoa. Transform your life, leave a legacy, transform your family. Now, the reason why the three-act structure, so you did this naturally without thinking. The minute you start opening a PowerPoint slide, you're not going to start thinking naturally because it's not a
Yes.
storytelling device. It's a fine tool, but it's not storytelling. It
Yes.
doesn't give you a structure. The reason why you think naturally, and this is another fascinating, you were talking about the primitive brain. Okay, let's talk about the primitive brain for a second. Anthropologists have told me that when our ancestors gained control of fire some hundreds of thousands of years ago, what, 60,000, 400,000, whatever, a lot of years ago. These anthropologists are like arguing about the date. I'm like, yeah, it's a long time ago. So when they gained control of fire, it was a major milestone in human development because fire warded off predators, cooked food, and
Hmm.
this is the fascinating part. There's actually research on it that people were able to congregate around campfires and they began telling stories,
Yes.
and that was the milestone because stories then um, kind of triggered people's exploration instinct and they wanted to live those stories too. And so people began to become explorers because those stories were handed back down. And, these explorers who went on ships would come back to countries and tell these stories. So storytelling, and we now know this through neuroscience as well, storytelling is kind of wired in us.
Hmm.
Our species is a storytelling species. We like to process information in story form, and we talk naturally in stories, and we remember stories. You don't remember everything about a particular presentation or an experience, but you remember things, snapshots in terms of stories. So what I'm suggesting to all of our viewers is learn storytelling, understand it a little bit more in depth. Not a lot, you don't have to read as many books as I do on the subject, but as long as you understand that there's kind of a basic storytelling structure, and if you can fit your information into a structure, it makes a big difference.
So, as an educator, I would obviously assume storytelling, giving stories, giving examples will leave a better impression on your students, correct?
I think it's more than a better impression. I mean, this is what your students are going to remember.
Hmm.
They're going to remember the story because it's the story that provides so much information in a short amount of time.
Hmm.
And then I'll want more information. And
Hmm.
remember, almost everything we do in communication kind of comes back to something related to story. So
Hmm.
story is not just, hey, Gino just told me a story about moving from New York and how multifamily helped him.
Hmm.
Yes, okay, that's a story. But when you use metaphors or analogies, or you try to compare one thing to another, or Jake told us about multifamily actually accomplishes three things, right? Or there's three facets to multifamily. There's apartments. What were the other two? I can't read my writing.
Oh,
There's three
food.
aspects.
Oh, food. It's a basic human need: food, clothing, and apartments.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Food, clothing, apartments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Satisfying a basic human need. So
Mm-hmm.
when we break things down into threes, that
Mm-hmm.
too is sort of a storytelling element.
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle said that, a great story has a beginning, middle, and an end. And then within that story, if you can break things up into threes, that's why you have the three little pigs and the three bears and the three musketeers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind
The
of like
power of
fairy
three.
tales.
Yeah.
Yeah, fairy tales are kind of broken up into threes. Anyway, so almost everything we do when it comes to communication is under the umbrella of story and narrative.
I love that. So before we go into the personal growth section, give us some more presentation tips. Maybe length of time, adding humor, some structure into it, because I think those are all important in a
Yeah,
good.
so storytelling and structure are absolutely key. I
Mm-hmm.
would assume that a lot of us are now giving talks or communicating over virtual meetings as well. That must be happening quite a bit now
Yes,
in your world, right?
it is,
All the
Um,
unfortunately.
time.
yeah. So now let's think about time. Think
Mm-hmm.
about time. I wrote a book on TED, on the TED Talks. TED, oh great. It's a good public speaking
Awesome
book.
book.
It's not just about how to
Mm-hmm.
give a TED Talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you can learn from some of the great
Yes.
TED speakers. So TED is a conference that's been around for more than 30 years. They figured something out. They figured out that 18 minutes is a really good amount of time. 18 minutes is about the maximum amount of time before people start to tune out, but it's enough time to deliver some solid information.
Mm-hmm.
Are
So
they
I
all
call
18
it,
minutes?
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
they can't, Jake, they cannot be more than 18 minutes, and it doesn't matter who you are.
Got it.
If you're Bill Gates, you get 18 minutes like everybody else. Yeah, so 18 minutes is the hard and fast rule about the TED Talk. So I've kind of called it the 18-minute rule. I mean, if you can condense your information into 18 minutes or less, it's actually stronger because people don't realize that there is strength in editing and condensing and really getting to the nuggets
Mm-hmm.
of the information that you want to convey. Now, we can speak for more than 18 minutes. Well, that's because we're breaking it up. We've got three different voices here, three characters. That helps to kind of re-engage and break things up. But
Yes,
if
that
it's
makes
just
sense.
you and a client or you and one person, and you're speaking for 45 minutes straight, you've lost them.
Mm-hmm.
That's cognitive overload.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. That
Yeah,
really
so
does.
especially on virtual, I just talked to Microsoft not too long ago, the folks who run Microsoft Teams,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's their virtual platform, and they're finding in their own internal research that Zoom meetings get people get fatigued after 30 minutes.
I thought it was 3. No.
It can be 3.
Yeah, maybe it's wishful thinking on Microsoft's part, but and
Mhm.
so why are all these virtual meetings are scheduled for 2 hours? Well, in that case, you really need to figure out how to break it up because
Mhm.
so everything has kind of a natural time limit. Inaugural speeches on the presidential level, they're about 15 minutes. John F. Kennedy inspired us to go to the moon in 15 minutes. So
Mhm.
I always ask executives, why is your PowerPoint an hour and a half? Is it,
Uh-huh.
is that necessary? Can you cut something out?
Mhm.
And so this whole idea of being your best editor, your own self editor, is really important.
Mhm. Love that.
All right, gang, let's take a quick time out to hear from our sponsor.
Are you looking for ways to improve your life?
Here at Jake and Gino, our mission is to empower students through financial education and the vehicle of multifamily investing.
Yes, Jake. We agree that a person with financial intelligence can change the world for the better.
We've created our proprietary 3-step framework, buy right, manage right, and finance right, that we teach to our community. This framework, along with education, our one-on-one mentorship, on-site boot camps, and the amazing community has propelled our students to massive success.
We've all been there. We've had so many students that have been able to shift their mindset, overcome limiting beliefs, and set a clear path to achieve their goals. Whether you're currently fixing and flipping, wholesaling, or buying single family rentals, and you know that multifamily investing is the right vehicle for you, I encourage you to visit jakeandgino.com/apply to schedule your complimentary consultation with our team. And I want to let you know this isn't a high pressure sales call. It's really just a discovery call to get to know each other better and see if we're a good fit for working together. And if for any reason we're not a good fit, our team has tons of resources we will share with you to help you along your journey.
If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels, go to jakeandgino.com/apply and schedule your call now. All right, we are back. All right, you were mentioning something a minute ago about PowerPoints. Now, I believe you use PowerPoints. Steve Jobs used PowerPoints, but is it more of a placeholder to basically allow you to remember something and then get back into the passion? I just want to hear your take on this and the best way to use PowerPoints.
Yeah, so I see that you have an Apple, you have a MacBook there, Jake. So before we upset too many Apple users, because they actually get serious about this, Steve Jobs used Apple Keynote,
Mhm.
not PowerPoint. God forbid he uses PowerPoint. So yeah, so anyway, used Apple Keynote. But look, I have seen terrible Apple Keynote slides, and I've seen beautifully designed ones, and I've seen beautifully designed PowerPoint and really bad PowerPoint. So I'm not sure if it's the tool, because most people just use the tool badly. They open their presentation and they start filling in bullet points and text,
Mhm.
which now we know is actually the worst way of delivering information. But it's easy, yeah, and create something quickly, you put a lot of text on the screen.
Mhm.
So Steve Jobs understood early on, again, well before a lot of people, well before even a lot of the science got into it, that it's people recall better in images rather than text on a
Mhm.
slide. So most of Steve Jobs' presentation were images and very limited text, maybe one or two words. So I like to use slides as a complement to the story.
Mhm.
You have to create the storyline first, the narrative structure, how you're going to create your pitch or your conversation. What are the examples and anecdotes that you're going to use? How are you going to build in key statistics? And there's a whole magic around statistics we could talk about. What metaphors or analogies are you going to use? So you have to think through all this and kind of whiteboard it first.
Mhm.
Then you can open up your presentation and just use that as a placeholder, like you said, as a complement to your to your conversation. And if you have to show graphics and all that, that's fine too. But the structure has to come first, and then you can use the slides to complement the narrative.
Yeah, and typically, like when Gino and I give a keynote, we'll have the slides. It'll be a picture, and then I might have like a little cheat sheet next to me on the bench or whatever that reminds me of, okay, this is, if we have to go a little deeper, but that's so we're on the right track at least. We're heading in the right direction.
Absolutely, yeah. Steve
Yeah.
Jobs had a cheat sheet right next to him.
I don't
Someone
feel so bad. I have a bad
yeah.
memory. You got to keep me focused here. So
So someone took a photograph once from behind, the curtain, and he had his Mac and he was doing a demo, and right there he had like bullet points, in bullet point form, like what the topics he was going to hit. So
Mhm.
those are like visual cues or reminders, but
yep.
he had already practiced it so often that once he looked down, he could see two words and he knew that was going to be the
Yes.
next thing.
Mhm.
Gino,
But
we're on the right
y-
track.
and you said you started with a photograph. Is that it?
Yeah, on the
Right?
slide, yeah, and then
Okay.
maybe
Well,
a little cheat sheet. Then like my cheat sheet will have photograph X, and then if we're telling what
perfect.
story and whatnot there, yeah.
But see,
So
most people in business don't even use a photograph, and they certainly don't start with an image or a photograph. They go right to pie charts.
yeah,
Mhm.
I've seen some,
I don't even know how to create a pie chart. To be honest.
I've seen some very terrifying PowerPoint slides, on the executive level, especially in Silicon Valley and technology.
Is that
But
because is that because though you think that they're trying to do their credibility? They're trying to build credibility right off the bat, saying that they have all the numbers, and why would I tell a
yeah,
story? Who wants to know
yeah.
about me? They want to know what the bottom line is. They want to know what the profitability is. They're getting way ahead of it. Yes.
Exactly. And what's amazing about that is that's what the entrepreneurs think, but the venture capitalists think in a completely different way.
Hmm.
They want to know, they want to believe in someone that even if they're not going to invest in that product, they want to invest in that person. And
Hmm.
the only way to do that is to be able to communicate in such a way that it is abundantly clear and the need is clear. You can't tell the need, you can't explain the need for something until you deliver the backstory.
I
And
love that.
I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who have said that they hit their head against the wall for a long time. Well, why isn't anyone investing in this great idea? And they realized it's because of the way I was delivering the idea.
Mhm.
And then when you kind of prod,
Marketing.
you ask them, right, exactly. You ask them for more examples. What do you mean by that? What did you change? Inevitably, it always gets down to something we've been talking about. They change the way they tell the narrative.
All right, last Steve Jobs question, I promise.
Yeah.
But if there was one takeaway from the book that someone could implement today to better themselves as a speaker from the Steve Jobs presentations book, what would that be?
It's something that I just learned recently, well after I wrote that book. Guy Kawasaki said that Steve Jobs used 190 point font on his slides.
Wow.
So try that next time. That's
Why
a
though?
word.
Huge, because you keep less words and people can see it.
Less words.
Oh, it's kind of like the Google
it,
homepage. There's only like 5
Yeah.
words on it, and that's all you
it,
get.
it forced him.
Brevity.
It
Mhm.
forced him to be brief and simple, and to work on the actual message or the
Mhm.
narrative behind it. So if you look on those PowerPoints, there really are only one word. There's only one word. So
Mhm.
can you? And it's a good exercise. It's actually a good exercise. I'm not saying that you do, one word slides, okay, because that does look a little odd. That was for a Steve Jobs keynote. And again, that was kind of a unique thing. You're more trying to get people pumped up and excited about the products, and then they had the rest of the week to, review the products. So it's a little different, but what a great exercise. Try
I
putting
love it.
one word on a slide.
Mhm.
Or how would you create a message and distill it down to one word or
Excellent.
one sentence? And
Mhm.
that is a really powerful exercise. So can I give you an anecdote on that? Not on Steve
Of
Jobs, but
course.
let's move on. But
Let's
this
do it.
is it's all on the same wavelength. Okay, Michael Moritz told me this when he invested in Google. He's the chairman of Sequoia Capital. Michael Moritz said, Google guys came into my office on a Friday,
Mhm.
Sergey Brin and Larry Page. And in one sentence, they were able to summarize what Google was. And that one sentence was that Google assembles or aggregates the world's information and makes the world's information accessible in one click. Okay, so making
Think about how
the world's
amazing that is, really.
information universally
Mhm.
accessible in one click. So what you don't, and it was almost word for word, very close. And what you don't hear in that is search engine.
Yeah.
What's a search engine?
Mhm.
So they were already thinking through how do we, because they were computer nerds at Stanford, right? Really hardcore computer scientists. How do we take what we've done, search engine? I'm not even sure if they use the word search engine, but how do you take something like that and make it understandable to people
Mhm.
who are not in that field and who don't even understand what the need would be? Okay, so Michael Moritz told me a valuable tip that I'm going to give all of your listeners, and this is something you should take home today. Moritz said, from that day, if an entrepreneur cannot express their idea in one sentence, I'm not interested. And then
I
he
love that.
added, and then he paused and he goes, period.
Mhm.
Because if you can't distill your big idea into one sentence, it means you haven't really thought it through. So that one sentence should be, what is it that it does? Or how is it going to change my life?
Mhm.
Now you've hooked me. Now I'm interested. Okay, tell me more.
Gino,
Love
the
that.
common denominator to all this stuff is simplifying communication for people. Okay, you
Hmm.
can't beat them to death. You can't pencil whip them, right? Like pencil whip,
Well, and
they
it's
have to
it's also to the
simplify it.
investors out there. It's really not.
Of
People don't really
course.
care about the property management. They don't care about. They want to know what multifamily is going to do for them, right? It's almost like our spy technique. It's all about what the other side's going to get from what we're trying to deliver. And if we can distill it down to, like you said, one sentence of saying, we're raising capital, we're going to buy this deal. What is this deal going to do for you? It's going to retire you. It's going to take you out of the stock market Ponzi
Yeah,
scheme,
we retire
put you
people.
into
Yeah,
yes, and put you
exactly.
into something that's more stable, something that's going to be desirable for the future. I think that's really what we should strive for as multifamily investors.
Okay, so you gave me that, like, that one sentence summary of what it all means. Why are you going to talk to me about this? All the information and the details that you're going to give me do what?
Hmm.
That's a hard thing to get to. It's actually
Yes.
really, it's a hard exercise. But when Jake said we retire people, oh, okay. So now I see the end goal. Tell me more.
Hmm.
How do I
Yeah.
Hmm.
get there? You
Yeah.
know?
I love that, Jake.
Yeah.
That's good. Any book recommendations besides the awesome books that you've written? Anything you've read recently that you want to shoot out there to folks?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, since your audience is made up of entrepreneurs, I learn so much from history books, from psychology books. I don't read any public speaking books per se. I learned everything about public speaking and communication from history books and mostly psychology books. So I'm sure your listeners are, or many of them are familiar with Daniel Kahneman's work. um,
Hmm.
he's the guy who wrote Thinking Fast, Slow.
Hmm.
Him
Heard
and
of it. I
him,
haven't read that one yet.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's a famous psychology book, and him and Amos Tversky were. Um, oh, remember Michael Lewis, The Undoing Project.
Mm.
I've heard
So
of that. Okay.
the guy who wrote Moneyball,
Hmm.
Yep.
um, and The Big Short, right?
Yep.
You
Hmm.
guys probably know
Yep.
that. That
Yeah.
same guy wrote a book called The Undoing Project, which was about Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. So they were very famous behavioral psychologists. And
Hmm.
so Kahneman, as a Nobel Prize winner, wrote this book called Thinking Fast, Slow. And Gino, it's all about. He calls the primitive brain System One brain.
Hmm.
That brain that just makes quick assumptions, and he
Hmm.
goes through a lot of the mental errors that people make because they think so quickly.
Hmm.
And then the System 2 brain is the more rationing or reasoning brain. It's a
Hmm.
fascinating psychology book, but you will be surprised at how much communication is in that book, because the
Hmm.
more you understand how the brain works, it's all about how do we
Yes.
communicate to the croc brain,
Hmm.
right, right, Gino?
Yes.
And we all, and it's all of us have the
Mhm,
same, we have the same kind of mental biases, and it's
mhm,
not a bad thing. It's just that's how we evolved. We evolved to see threats. We evolved to see certain things, and it was a critical step in our evolution. So it's all important that we have that side of our brain. But if you
mhm,
don't understand how to control it, how to manage it, and how other people think about you, then I think you're gonna lose an opportunity for success. So
mhm,
I actually like to read psychology. Dan
mhm,
Ariely's stuff too. Ariely is a
mhm.
fantastic psychologist too. Anything behavioral psychology, really really powerful.
Yeah, I think for Gino and myself, reading about real estate these days. I mean, we'll be up, to date with the different, newsletters and things that come out, what's going on in the industry and industry updates. But I think that so much from other places can teach you. You just mentioned basically in a roundabout way self-awareness.
Hmm.
I'll probably get more from like a self-awareness book and how to interact with our team than I will a real estate book at this point. So it's very well received.
Yeah.
Um, any tips for someone, and this may be very elementary, and I don't want to bore you with it, but we had an event a couple weeks ago, and we had someone from our team, our property management team, for the first time get up and speak. Very smart lady, scared to death. Any tips for helping people overcome that?
Well, that's why I read psychology books, because they've actually helped me. They've helped me quite a bit, and to understand it. Uh, that everyone gets nervous about speaking in public.
Every single time, I do. I
Everything.
know
Yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
we all do. You don't get over it. Again, croc brain. I love that, Gina. It's croc brain, because again, this is the fascinating stuff about history and anthropology. Because if you were kicked out of the cave or
You're
the
done.
tribe, you'd really be in trouble. So
Mhm,
we have evolved to want to be accepted socially.
mhm,
And when you have to, you're on,
You're
and it's
putting it
all
put it to the
about you.
test.
That's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. So you
mhm,
want to have that we crave acceptance. So how do champion athletes get over their nerves? I've talked to field goal kickers, in the NFL. Okay, that's the toughest one. Or soccer players. You know how they do it is they practice, but
mhm,
they practice in real world conditions. So they try, or golfers, they'll just kind of make these side bets or play these games with one another. I have to make 22-foot putts in a row before I can move on to the next drill.
Hmm.
And the reason why they do that is because they have to add a little stress on themselves, so they at least kind of mimic the feel that I've got a little pressure here.
Hmm.
So a few people have told me, some psychologists have told me, that the reason why we get nervous when we're public speaking, to a point where it's really paralyzing for a lot of people, is because you don't practice in real world conditions. If you practiced it all the time and you were in front of real people giving your spiel or the presentation and practicing in front of friends or peers, by the time you do it for real, you have a lot less anxiety about it. But most people will never do that. We just sort of look at our slides or look at our notes and say, okay, well, I'm on. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm starting to get a little nervous here. Yes, that's natural, but
Hmm.
practice it ahead of time. So I have found that that is the best way of helping people not conquer nerves, because it's almost impossible to eliminate our nerves. A psychologist told me you want to get your butterflies flying in the same direction.
Hmm.
I love that analogy. They're still there, but you've turned them into energy and excitement.
Hmm.
Toastmasters.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, join a Toastmasters.
Yeah, exactly.
Carmine.
And that's all about just getting up and standing up in front of people, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a forced, contrived way of getting you to practice in front of real people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love the show today. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you and your company, and where can they get the books?
Well, please, if you could, please remember a good Italian name like Carmine Gallo. It shouldn't be hard for us.
Can't forget
And,
that name.
and you will find me. I do have a newsletter where I send out once a week, just one topic on communication, usually based on an interview that I've done. So if you just go to carminegallo.com, Gallo, Carmine Gallo, you can find me on the internet, and every book has its own page. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me easily there as well.
Gino, this is fun. What are the takeaways from today?
So, Jake, picture this. Young Carmine Gallo goes into journalism for 15 years, right? Television business news in New York City. Then he decides he moves on to a VP of global public relations firm.
Sounds fancy.
And then from there, he says he has $1,200 to his name. He's getting at a job. He becomes an entrepreneur. Big step, right? And 9 books later, he's created, I think, an amazing brand. He's created an amazing company, and he's teaching others how to become a communicator. And that's what it's all about. It's all about storytelling. We didn't get into the storyteller's secrets. We didn't get into a lot of the other stuff that in his book. So I would actually recommend everybody, after you get off the podcast, go out, check his website, and start buying his books, and buy one at a time. You're going to love every single one of them. The Talk Like Ted is amazing. It's an amazing book. It has little storyteller secrets at the end of every chapter. I recommend everyone to read it. But I just want to hit on that 3-act structure one more time. I want everyone to write this down. The first act is the setup. It's 30 minutes long, really important. The second one is where the fun and games begin, right? That's where the villains come, the heroes are there. That's an hour long. And then the third part is the resolution or the transformation. And it can be 2 hours for a movie. It can be 2 minutes for your presentation. Follow that. And don't do what I did just by winging it and creating and getting lucky. This doesn't have to be all about luck. Really, I think it really comes down to educating yourself, learning these steps, and actually implementing them. And like what Carmine said, it's hard work. Condensing everything down to one sentence is not going to happen in 20 minutes. It may take you 2 weeks, but once you've done it, it's there, and you're able to communicate that a lot better.
Throw that javelin into IBM. Carmine, I truly enjoyed speaking with you today. This was great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Carmine. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Gino.